In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the circular saw safely. So in order to use it safely, we have to start with our safety equipment. So in here you should have safety glasses on, and you should also have earmuffs for the saw because it's loud. We're going to start with the battery operated one. The battery goes on the back, slides in, clicks into place. This saw, as it spins, it has an arrow showing you which way the blade spins, so it rotates up. So it's actually cutting from the bottom up on the board. And it has a guard right here in order to keep you safe. It snaps back in place. It moves up out of the way as you cut through the board and then comes back. So while you're cutting, the blade is sticking down and it's exposed, so you have to be careful. And on here, in order to squeeze the trigger, if you squeeze it, nothing happens. There's a little safety button here, and that's to keep it from accidentally somebody carrying it, putting their finger on the trigger, and cutting their waist. If they don't push this first, it will not work. This saw is designed to be either used with two hands, like this, one on this handle, one on this to help keep it straight, or one hand is holding the material and then the other is cutting. Sometimes you have to guide the plate up, but notice my hand is on the opposite side of the blade, so I won't get hurt. We'll then use the plug-in power saw, which is way more powerful. Everybody wants to go to the battery power, which is fine. It is more convenient, but it doesn't have the same amount of power. You can either hold your workpiece down, or you can use a clamp. In this case, I'm going to use a clamp. On this saw, you'll see that there are two marks. One on this left side of the cut says 0, and the other says 45. So if the blade is straight up and down, you're going to line your mark up with this side. If it's at a 45, you line it up with this side. One of the biggest safety features people forget is how deep are you going to cut. I don't want this saw set so far down that it's cutting an inch or two below, because that's where my hand or leg could get hurt. So I'm going to adjust the blade so it just cuts through the wood. In order to do that, there is a lever on one side. Remember, all the saws are similar, but every brand is slightly different. I'm going to loosen this up. That allows this plate to move up and down. So as you can see, as the plate goes all the way down, I'm cutting at almost 0, and as it comes up, you cut more. So sit it on the workpiece and adjust the blade so that it just barely goes through your piece of wood. And then you lock the handle down, which happens to be on this side. Now there's less risk of me getting cut as it goes through. So I'll put my battery back on. Earmuff. And then I'm just going to follow along the first line right here. On that first cut, I was on this side using the mark to follow it, and I couldn't see the blade. So on the second cut, I'm going to reverse to this side where I can see the blade and the mark. It helps kind of guide and make sure it's straight. But now it's important, I don't have any spot to hold the workpiece, so the hand needs to come up here in order to make sure that I don't get hurt. The last thing I want to talk about on this is sometimes this guard will get stuck or caught on your workpiece and it won't move forward. You can't force it. The only thing it's going to do is twist, which will bend your blade or stop the motor. What you can do is take your finger and only right here where this lever is, you can pull up on the guard, and once it gets started, you can let go and it'll be fine. Never try to pull up the guard from here. That's how you get hurt or cut badly. It's always here. Now I'm going to make a similar cut using the plug-in saw, which is more powerful, but the first thing I'm going to have to do is set the blade height. So that lever is right here on the back. You pop it up, my plate can now move. I'm going to pull back on the guard, and then I'm going to set the height. It dropped all the way down. So all I have to do is just lift up until it's just barely through the wood and then lock it down. Main difference between, other than this one's more powerful than our battery powered one, is obviously the cord. You don't want to cut your cord in half. It'll eventually happen, but you need to be careful of that. So you're always wanting to keep the cord behind you. So I like to step over top of it and put it behind me. If the extension cord gets caught, never pull while the saw is running and go like this, because that whipping action can have it pull underneath and you'll cut your blade, or cut your cord with the blade. Also notice, the blades are on opposite sides on this one. So this one, for me, I'm left-handed. I can easily not only see the mark, but the blade with my left hand on it and my right hand down here. Where earlier, this one, the blade's on the left side, so I had to switch to my right hand. You have to get used to cutting with both hands. It's awkward at first, but eventually you'll be fine with that. So now I'll make a cut with the plug-in saw. Notice as a jump in the video, what happened is when I started to make my cut, the blade stopped spinning because this bolt wasn't quite tight enough. So I went ahead and tightened it, and we're going to try again. Make sure when you start your saw, your blade's about 1/2 inch away. Never touch the wood when you pull the trigger. That'll cause the saw to jump. So I like to line it up and then back up a little bit. Now I'm going to make a cut on a bigger piece of plywood, which is a little more difficult because you're going to be doing some reaching and you have to set up on sawhorses. Unlike with a piece of wood that's clamped down, this stuff tends to move. So the first thing we have to look at is our sawhorses. So underneath here, I just have 2 sawhorses, which are basically just 2x4s put together in a triangle in order to give me a nice, comfortable height. You always have to then lay some 2x4s on top. These are called sacrificial 2x4s. As I cut the piece, I will cut little marks into here, but not real deep. You don't want to actually cut into your sawhorses because that damages them and then they'll fall apart. So you put up here a couple of sacrificial 2x4s. Your sawhorses you want fairly close together. If you're cutting in the middle, you want them as close together as possible. And if you're cutting off the edge, you just need whatever keeps a good balance. So on this piece, I already drew a couple lines with a chalk line. And my first cut will be off the edge. It'll be nice and stable. I put my hand here and cut. The second one, as you cut through, if you didn't have these sacrificial 2x4s there, as you cut through, it would want to collapse. And people will do that. They'll cut across and then they fall. And then they get hurt or they cut their cord. So these 2x4s going across are very important. So the first cut, I'll go ahead and use the battery powered one. So from this side, I can't see the blade very well. So I'll actually switch hands and cut on the other side. I'm going to line up with my 0 mark, and I can see the blade right at the line. I'll back up just a little bit. But think, what did I not do yet? That's right, I didn't set the depth of the blade. Right now, this is going to be cutting probably all the way through the 2x4. I don't want that. This is only a 1/2 inch plywood, so I'll go ahead and loosen up the little knob right here, and I'll lower the blade so that it just barely goes through the wood. And then tighten this back up. Here we go. Notice I moved with the saw as I went across. It just gives you a straighter line. If you have to reach where the board's longer, it's okay, but it's harder to keep the line straight. So now on this next one, I'll cut across the middle. And now if you look, my sacrificial 2x4 has just a little tiny cut in it, and that way I didn't cut my sawhorse. Now I'm going to make another cut with the plug-in saw. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the blade height. So we'll pull up on the bar in the back, drop the blade all the way down, and then just push the saw down until it's just through your wood. Lock the plate back in place. Remember, all the handles are just a little bit different but similar, so you have to just kind of adapt and figure it out. What's nice about this one now is the blade's on the right. You guys can see the blade cutting a little better, and since I'm left-handed, it makes it a little easier for me to cut. I'll probably put my hand over here and reach across just a little bit. Biggest thing, watch that cord. Keep it back. Sometimes I like to put my foot around it if I can't get it behind me, but don't let it get stuck on something. Sometimes it gets caught on the front right here. If that happens, stop the cut, even in the middle, it's okay. Adjust the cord, and then you'll be able to back up and continue. I'll go ahead and stop in the middle as if my cord gets stuck to show you what to do. So I'm going to pretend my cord got stuck right here. A lot of times it is this little crack that it gets caught on. So when you stop, in order to restart, all you need to do is just back up about 1/2 inch so the blade's not touching the wood when you squeeze the trigger. If it is, you're going to either break chunks out or the saw will jerk around a little bit or twist. If you start turning or twisting, the blade will slow down. It is possible for these to cut crooked even though it should be a straight blade. It just takes a little bit of practice. Notice I let the blade stop spinning before I moved it or did anything else. And then you can also see that it just barely put a mark into my sacrificial 2x4.